A black teenager stands in a luxury jewelry store, his eyes darting from one glittering piece to another. He imagines surprising his mother with a beautiful necklace someday. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. Security guards converge, their faces stern. Accusations of theft hang heavy in the air. The teen's heart pounds as he tries to explain, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. The situation escalates, police sirens wailing in the distance. Just as all hope seems lost, the store's door swings open. A commanding presence fills the room, silencing everyone. What happens next will change everything. As we reflect on this story, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Jamal's alarm pierced the early morning quiet, rousing him from a restless sleep. He blinked away the lingering fog of dreams, a smile spreading across his face as he remembered the significance of the day. Today was his mother's birthday, and he had been saving for weeks to buy her something truly special. Jamal's mind raced with anticipation as he went through his morning routine. Thanks to his after-school job, the delicate silver necklace he'd spotted in Hartley's jewelry downtown was just within reach. A glance at his phone confirmed the balance in his account, just enough for the perfect gift. The school day crawled by, each tick of the clock amplifying Jamal's nerves. When the final bell rang, he found himself hesitating at the bus stop. The familiar route home beckoned, but the image of his mother's face lighting up at the sight of the necklace spurred him forward. Jamal's footsteps echoed on the sidewalk as he approached Hartley's. Through the sparkling window, he could see the necklace nestled in its velvet display. His palms grew clammy as he reached for the door handle, doubts creeping in about whether he'd be taken seriously in such an upscale store. Taking a deep breath, Jamal straightened his shoulders and pushed open the door. The soft chime of a bell announced his arrival, and he felt the weight of eyes upon him. Forcing himself to appear calm, he made his way to the counter, where the necklace gleamed under soft lighting. As a sales associate approached, Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. To his surprise and relief, the woman greeted him with a warm smile. "Can I help you find something special today?" she asked. Jamal nodded, his voice steadier than he expected, as he pointed to the necklace. "I'd like to see that one, please. It's for my mom's birthday." The associate's smile widened as she carefully removed the necklace from its display. "You have excellent taste," she said, laying it out for Jamal to inspect. "Your mother is very lucky to have such a thoughtful son." As Jamal admired the delicate silver chain and pendant, his earlier anxiety began to fade. He found himself relaxing, asking questions about the necklace's design, and even discussing potential gift-wrapping options. The transaction was complete. Jamal left the store with a spring in his step, a gift box tucked securely in his backpack. Little did he know that his moment of triumph was about to be shattered. As he turned the corner, Jamal failed to notice Karen, another store employee, watching him with narrowed eyes from the doorway of Hartley's. Her suspicion, born of prejudice and past experiences, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change Jamal's life forever. Karen's eyes narrowed as Jamal entered Hartley's jewelry. With 15 years of experience, she prided herself on her ability to spot potential trouble. She watched the teenager from behind a display case, her fingers absently polishing an already spotless glass surface. His hesitation at the door and wide-eyed gaze as he took in the surroundings reinforced her suspicion. "Can I help you find something?" Karen's colleague, Emma, greeted Jamal with a warm smile. Karen tensed, wanting to intervene. Didn't Emma see the risk? But she held back, watching the interaction unfold with growing unease. To her surprise, Jamal engaged in a polite conversation about a silver necklace. His voice was steady, his manner respectful. For a moment, Karen's certainty wavered. Was she jumping to conclusions? But then she noticed his hand, briefly brushing against his backpack. In Karen's mind, that innocuous gesture transformed into something sinister. As Jamal completed his purchase, Karen's suspicion reached a fever pitch. How could he afford such an item? It had to be stolen money, or worse, a sophisticated scam. She watched him leave, the gift box nestled safely in his backpack, and made a split-second decision. With trembling fingers, Karen reached for the phone. "Security? This is Karen from Hartley's. We've got a situation." Her voice dropped to a whisper, eyes fixed on Jamal's retreating figure. "I need you to check on a young man who just left the store, African-American, blue jacket, carrying a backpack. I have reason to believe he may have shoplifted." As she hung up, a flicker of doubt crossed Karen's mind, but she pushed it aside, convincing herself she was doing her job, protecting the store. She couldn't have known that her actions, born from unchecked bias, were about to set in motion a chain of events that would change lives and shake a community to its core. Outside, the security guard's heavy footsteps echoed on the sidewalk as he approached Jamal. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, setting the stage for a confrontation that would expose the insidious nature of racial profiling and force a reckoning with deeply ingrained prejudices. "Stop right there, kid." 4 words shattered the peace of a sunny afternoon, thrusting Jamal into a scenario he'd only heard about from others. As curious onlookers began to gather, the weight of centuries of racial tension bore down on one teenager's shoulders. The security guard's voice rang out, causing Jamal to freeze mid-step. He turned slowly, confusion etched across his face. The guard, a tall man with a stern expression, closed the distance between them in a few quick strides. "Let me see your hands," the guard demanded, his hand hovering near his hip. Jamal's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. He'd just bought a birthday gift for his mother. With trembling fingers, Jamal raised his hands, palms out. "Sir, I don't understand. What's going on?" His voice cracked slightly. The guard's eyes narrowed. "We received a report of suspicious behavior in the store. Empty your pockets and open your backpack." Jamal's heart pounded as he fumbled with his jacket pockets, turning them inside out. "I didn't do anything wrong," he protested. "I just bought a necklace for my mom's birthday." From the store's entrance, Karen emerged, pointing an accusing finger. "That's him," she called out. "I saw him acting suspiciously near the display cases." Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No, I was just looking at the jewelry. I bought something." He reached for his backpack, but the guard's sharp voice stopped him. "Don't move!" the guard barked, his hand now resting on his weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The store manager pushed through the growing crowd, his face a mask of concern and suspicion. He surveyed the scene, eyes darting between Jamal, the security guard, and the onlookers. "What's the problem here?" the manager demanded, his voice carrying an air of authority. The guard turned to him, keeping one eye on Jamal. "We have a potential shoplifting situation. This young man was reported acting suspiciously in the store." Jamal's protests fell on deaf ears as the manager's expression hardened. He pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. "I think it's best if we let the police handle this," he said grimly. As the manager dialed, Jamal felt a wave of despair wash over him. The sound of approaching sirens told him that this was all too real, and things were about to get even more complicated. Blue and red lights flashed through the store windows, casting an eerie glow on the tense scene inside. The arrival of 2 officers was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of the local police department. Officer Davis, a veteran of 15 years, entered Hartley's jewelry with his partner, Officer Chen. Their eyes quickly scanned the surroundings before settling on Jamal. "What seems to be the problem here?" Davis asked, his tone measured but authoritative. The store manager hurried to explain, gesturing towards Jamal. "We have reason to believe this young man may have shoplifted. He was acting suspiciously. Davis turned to Jamal, his expression stern. "Son, I need you to explain what you're doing here today." Jamal's voice wavered as he responded, "I was buying a birthday gift for my mom." Officer Chen circled behind Jamal, her hand resting on her belt. "Do you have a receipt for this purchase?" Jamal nodded, reaching for his backpack. "Yes, it's right here. I can show you." "Hold it," Davis interrupted, raising his hand. "Keep your hands where we can see them. We'll check the bag ourselves." As Chen searched Jamal's backpack, the teenager stood rigidly, acutely aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. "Here's a receipt," Chen announced, holding up a small slip of paper, "and a gift box from the store." Despite this evidence, Davis remained skeptical. "That doesn't rule out the possibility that you took something else. We've seen plenty of tricks before." Jamal's words burst forth, tinged with desperation. "But I didn't take anything. I saved up for weeks to buy this necklace. Why won't you believe me?" The officers exchanged glances, their body language suggesting they were considering escalating the situation. Davis reached for his handcuffs, the metal glinting ominously in the store's bright lights. Jamal's voice shook as he made one last plea. "Please, can I call my mom? She can vouch for me. She's someone important in the community." Davis paused, his hand still on the handcuffs. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "All right, you can make one call. But don't try anything funny." As Jamal dialed with trembling fingers, he silently prayed his mother would answer. The woman on the other end of that call was about to turn this entire situation on its head. Mayor Alexandra Jones's phone rang, interrupting a heated budget discussion. As she answered, her son Jamal's panicked voice poured through the speaker. Alexandra's frown deepened as she pieced together a chilling scenario. Her son, out to buy her a birthday gift, now stood surrounded by police, accused of a crime he didn't commit. A surge of emotions washed over Alexandra, but she quickly composed herself. Rising from her seat, she announced, "I have to go. There's an urgent family matter." She gathered her things swiftly, ignoring the murmurs of her colleagues. Alexandra's heels echoed through City Hall's marble halls as she strode towards the exit. Her mind raced, recalling her tireless efforts to improve community-police relations and address racial profiling issues. Now, those very problems threatened her son. Outside, Alexandra took a deep breath, centering herself. She couldn't arrive as an angry mother. She needed to be Mayor Jones, a figure of authority who could diffuse the situation with calm rationality. The drive to Hartley's jewelry passed in a blur. Alexandra forced herself to focus on the road, even as images of a frightened Jamal flashed through her mind. As she pulled up to the store, she spotted the police cruiser, its lights still flashing. A curious crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Alexandra parked and stepped out, smoothing her suit jacket with slightly trembling hands. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, transforming from Jamal's mother into Mayor Alexandra Jones. Through the store window, she saw Jamal, his hands raised, fear etched across his young face. The sight nearly shattered her composure, but Alexandra held firm. As she reached for the door handle, she steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. Whatever happened next would force an entire community to confront its deepest, most uncomfortable truths. Alexandra Jones stepped into the jewelry store, her presence immediately drawing all eyes. The scene before her was tense. Jamal stood surrounded by 2 police officers, while store staff watched with unease. Alexandra approached with calm authority. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "I'm here for my son." The older officer spoke first. "Ma'am, this is an ongoing investigation. We need you to step back." Alexandra's gaze remained steady. "I understand you're doing your job, officer. But there's been a misunderstanding." She turned to Jamal. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Jamal nodded, visibly relieved. "Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just buying your birthday present." The store manager stepped forward, confused. Your son? Who exactly are you? Alexandra drew herself up. I'm Mayor Alexandra Jones. I'd like an explanation as to why my son is being treated like a criminal for shopping in your establishment. The revelation stunned the room. The officers paled, and mouths fell open as the implications sank in. The older officer recovered first. Mayor Jones, we had no idea. We were responding to a report of suspicious activity. Alexandra's eyes narrowed. Suspicious activity. What was suspicious about a young man shopping for his mother's birthday? The store manager stammered. Our employee thought she saw, but clearly there's been a mistake. A mistake, Alexandra repeated, her voice quiet but intense. A mistake that could have had serious consequences for my son, for any young man in his position. She looked at each person in turn. I want to know exactly what happened here, from the beginning. And I want to know what steps you're taking to ensure this never happens again. As apologies and explanations tumbled forth, Alexandra placed a protective hand on Jamal's shoulder. This incident, born from unconscious bias and hasty judgment, would soon spark a citywide conversation about racial profiling and police practices. But for now, as mother and son stood united against injustice, the first seeds of change were taking root. The tension in the jewelry store hung thick in the air as the store manager stepped forward, his face ashen. His eyes darted nervously between Mayor Alexandra Jones and her son Jamal. Madam Mayor, Mr. Jones, we've failed you today, he began, his voice quivering. This incident goes against everything we stand for as a business. Alexandra stood, motionless, her expression unreadable. Jamal, still shaken, instinctively moved closer to his mother, finding comfort in her unwavering presence. I'd like you to explain exactly what led to this situation. Alexandra's voice was low and controlled, but tinged with unmistakable anger. What actions or assumptions resulted in my son being treated like a criminal? The manager glanced at Karen, the employee who had first raised suspicions. Karen seemed to shrink under the mayor's piercing gaze, her earlier certainty crumbling. We have procedures in place to prevent theft, the manager explained. When we notice behavior that seems out of the ordinary, we're trained to be cautious. And what exactly was out of the ordinary about my son's behavior? Alexandra pressed, her eyes narrowing. Was it the color of his skin? His age? The fact that he dared to shop in a store like this? The silence that followed was deafening. The staff's embarrassment was written plainly across their faces as they confronted the uncomfortable truth behind their actions. Jamal felt a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Relief at being vindicated warred with the lingering hurt and anger of being unfairly targeted. His shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of the day's events finally settling upon him. Alexandra, sensing her son's distress, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder before turning back to address the room. Her voice rang out clear and strong, filled with the conviction of a leader and the passion of a mother. What happened here today is a stark reminder of the insidious nature of racial profiling, she began. It's about the unconscious biases that lead us to see threat where there is none, to assume guilt based on appearance rather than actions. The room hung on her every word as Alexandra continued, her impromptu speech building in intensity. This incident reflects a systemic problem that plagues our society, robbing innocent people of their dignity and safety. It's about the fear that parents of color live with every day, knowing their children might be unfairly targeted simply for existing in certain spaces. As Alexandra's powerful words filled the room, a palpable shift occurred. Shame and understanding dawned on the faces of the staff and officers present. The mayor's connection to the incident drove home the real-world impact of their actions, in a way no training seminar ever could. This ends now, Alexandra declared, her tone brooking no argument. I want to see immediate, concrete steps taken to address the biases in your policies and training. This store and this city can and must do better. Alexandra arrived at Hartley's Jewelry's corporate headquarters a week after the incident. The polished boardroom stood in stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. CEO Richard Hartley addressed her, expressing deep regret for what had occurred. The corporate team presented their initial plan, a day-long sensitivity training, a revised code of conduct, and a review of hiring practices. Alexandra, drawing on her political experience, recognized the carefully crafted language designed to placate without substantial commitments. She pushed for more meaningful reforms, advocating for ongoing, mandatory bias training for all employees and transparent reporting of discrimination-related complaints. As the negotiation progressed, the corporate team's resistance began to crumble in the face of Alexandra's unwavering resolve. The atmosphere shifted from defensive to collaborative as both sides worked towards effecting real change. After hours of intense discussion, an agreement was reached. Hartley's Jewelry is committed to implementing a comprehensive anti-bias training program developed with diversity experts. They agreed to hire diversity consultants to review and revise company policies at all levels. Most significantly, they pledged to establish a community advisory board, giving voice to those historically marginalized in luxury retail spaces. Alexandra left the boardroom with cautious optimism. She had secured a significant victory, but she knew the real work was just beginning. The true test would lie in the implementation of these promises and the long-term commitment to change. Meanwhile, across town, news of the incident and its aftermath reached the police department. The chief of police contemplated the implications for his department, unaware that the reckoning begun in a jewelry store was about to challenge long-held assumptions in law enforcement and demand a new approach to policing and community relations. Police Chief Robert Hawkins stood at the podium, his face etched with worry as he addressed the crowd of reporters. "I am announcing an internal investigation into the conduct of the officers involved in the incident at Hartley's Jewelry," he stated, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. The announcement sent ripples through the crowd, but Chief Hawkins fielded questions with practiced calm. He spoke of transparency and accountability, promising a thorough review of departmental policies. However, for many in the community, these words rang hollow. As days passed, the pressure intensified. Community activists flooded city council meetings, their impassioned speeches echoing through crowded chambers. They spoke of racial profiling and lives disrupted by unwarranted suspicion. Council members, sensing the shifting political winds, began to push for oversight committees and policy reviews. Chief Hawkins found himself caught in a storm. Every decision was scrutinized and dissected. He watched as officers grew defensive, morale plummeting under the weight of public mistrust. Yet he couldn't ignore the pain and anger in the eyes of community members who felt betrayed by those sworn to protect them. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a community forum, a young boy, no older than Jamal, stood up to speak. His voice trembled as he described his fear of the police, a fear born not of wrongdoing but of the color of his skin. The room fell silent, the child's words cutting through rhetoric and defensiveness. At that moment, Chief Hawkins made his decision. The next day, he announced a sweeping set of reforms: mandatory bias recognition training, de-escalation protocols, and a civilian review board with real authority. It was a risk, he knew. Some officers would resist and politicians would argue it went too far or not far enough. As he looked out at the mix of hope and skepticism on the faces before him, Chief Hawkins felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but it was a start. While the city grappled with systemic change, Jamal Jones faced a personal battle. The incident at Hartley's Jewelry had left deep, unseen scars on the young man's psyche. His mother Alexandra soon realized that the fight for justice was only part of their challenge. In the days following the incident, Jamal's world contracted. The once outgoing teenager now hesitated to leave the house alone. Alexandra noticed his reluctance to run even simple errands, his eyes constantly scanning public spaces. One evening, as Jamal picked at his dinner, Alexandra decided to address the issue. "Sweetheart," she began gently, "I've noticed you haven't been going out much lately. Do you want to talk about what's on your mind?" Jamal set down his fork, his voice barely audible. "Mom, I keep replaying that day in my head. Every time I see a security guard or a police officer, my heart races. I can't shake the feeling that it could happen again." Alexandra reached across the table, taking Jamal's hand. "What you're feeling is valid," she assured him. "That experience was traumatic, and it's okay to struggle with it." As they talked, Jamal revealed the anger beneath his fear. He felt betrayed by a system meant to protect him, questioning whether he could ever feel safe in his community again. Alexandra listened intently, offering comfort without minimizing Jamal's feelings. She shared her own experiences with racial profiling, helping him understand that his emotions were shared by many. "I'm here for you no matter what," Alexandra said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll get through this together. And if you're open to it, we might be able to turn this experience into something positive." Jamal looked up, curiosity mixing with apprehension. Alexandra explained that a community forum was being organized to address racial profiling and police reform. "They've asked if you'd be willing to share your story," she said softly, "but only if you feel ready. No pressure." Jamal considered the idea silently. The thought of reliving that day in front of strangers was daunting, but as he reflected on his mother's words about turning pain into change, determination stirred within him. "Maybe if I speak out, it could help prevent this from happening to someone else," Jamal said, his voice growing stronger. "I think I want to do it, Mom. I want to tell my story." Alexandra smiled, pride and love shining in her eyes. "I'll be right there with you, every step of the way," she promised. As Jamal prepared for the forum, a mix of nervousness and anticipation filled the Jones household. Neither mother nor son could have predicted the ripple effect Jamal's decision would have on their community or the challenges that still lay ahead. The community center buzzed with anticipation as residents filled every seat. Mayor Alexandra Jones took the stage, her eyes scanning the diverse faces before her. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this crucial town hall on racial profiling in our community. Tonight, we have a very special speaker who will share his personal experience. Please welcome my son, Jamal Jones." A hush fell over the crowd as Jamal approached the microphone. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes burned with determination. "A few weeks ago, I went to buy a birthday gift for my mom," Jamal began, his voice gaining strength. "I never imagined that simple act would end with me surrounded by police, accused of a crime I didn't commit." Jamal recounted the events at Hartley's Jewelry, describing the initial excitement of choosing the perfect gift, the growing unease as he felt eyes following him, and the sudden, overwhelming fear when confronted by security and police. "At that moment, I wasn't Jamal Jones, an honor student and son of the mayor," he said, his voice cracking. "I was just another young black man, automatically seen as a threat." He spoke of the aftermath, the lingering anxiety, the hesitation to go out alone, the constant fear of being unfairly targeted again. Jamal described sleepless nights and difficult conversations with his mother, grappling with a world that seemed determined to view him as dangerous. As he neared the end of his speech, Jamal's voice grew stronger, filled with resolve. "I refuse to let this experience define me or limit my future," he declared. "Instead, I want it to be a catalyst for change." He called on the community to confront their biases, to demand accountability from law enforcement and businesses, and to work together to create a city where everyone felt safe and valued. This is about every person who has ever been judged based on the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. We can do better. We must do better." As Jamal's final words rang out, the room erupted in applause. Alexandra rushed to embrace her son, pride and love evident in her expression. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of outrage at injustice and determination to effect change. It was clear that Jamal's story had struck a chord, giving a face and a voice to an issue that could no longer be ignored. As people began to discuss action plans and next steps, it was evident that Jamal's bravery in sharing his story had set in motion a wave of change that would ripple far beyond the walls of the community center. Jamal's story quickly captured national attention, becoming a focal point for discussions about racial profiling and systemic inequality. News outlets sought interviews, and social media buzzed with demands for justice. Alexandra's phone rang with an opportunity that could amplify their message, an invitation to appear on The Morning Show, one of the country's most watched talk programs. Alexandra recognized the potential impact, but she hesitated, glancing at Jamal. His face showed a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It's up to you, sweetheart," Alexandra said softly. "This could lead to real change, but only if you're comfortable." Jamal took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Let's do it, Mom. People need to hear what happened." The days before the TV appearance were filled with intense preparation. Alexandra coached Jamal on interview techniques, helping him articulate his thoughts clearly. They practiced potential questions, discussing how to handle tough topics without becoming defensive. Jamal spent hours in front of the mirror, working to project confidence despite his nerves. As they stepped onto the brightly lit set, Jamal's heart raced. The studio audience's applause washed over them, momentarily overwhelming him. But then he felt his mother's reassuring hand on his back, grounding him. They took their seats across from the host, a respected journalist, known for her probing interviews. The conversation began, with Jamal recounting the events at Hartley's. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, the words flowing more easily than he'd expected. Alexandra provided context about broader issues of racial profiling in their community. As the interview progressed, the host's questions became more pointed. "Jamal, some people might say this was just a misunderstanding, not racism. How would you respond to that?" Jamal paused, considering his words carefully. "When you're constantly treated with suspicion because of how you look, it's a systemic problem that needs to be addressed." The host nodded, turning to Alexandra. "Mayor Jones, what concrete steps are being taken to prevent incidents like this in the future?" Alexandra leaned forward, her voice firm. "We're implementing mandatory bias training for all city employees, including law enforcement. We're also establishing a civilian oversight board to review complaints of racial profiling. But more importantly, we're having difficult conversations as a community about the unconscious biases we all carry." The impact of their TV appearance was immediate and far-reaching. Viewers praised Jamal's poise and articulate responses, while others shared their own experiences with racial profiling. The conversation about race and policing in America had been reignited. In the following days, the ripple effects became apparent. Lawmakers in several states announced plans to introduce anti-profiling legislation, citing Jamal's story as a catalyst. The incident at Hartley's had transformed from a personal ordeal into a rallying cry for change, spurring concrete actions towards addressing systemic inequalities. The city council chambers buzzed with anticipation as members gathered for a pivotal session on racial profiling in Millbrook. Mayor Alexandra Jones sat in the audience beside her son Jamal, her recusal a necessary step to maintain the process's integrity. Councilwoman Maria Rodriguez presented the ordinance outlining requirements for bias training, body cameras, and a civilian review board. The chamber erupted in a mix of reactions. Councilman Frank Harris, a former police officer, voiced concerns about potentially hindering law enforcement's ability to perform their duties. The debate intensified as community activists shared personal experiences of racial targeting, while police union representatives emphasized officer safety and split-second decision-making challenges. Jamal observed silently, acutely aware of his role in catalyzing this moment. As tensions peaked, Councilwoman Rodriguez proposed an amendment that addressed law enforcement concerns while preserving the ordinance's core principles. This shift sparked a constructive dialogue, with council members finding common ground and making careful adjustments. Jamal watched in awe as the process unfolded, realizing the complexity of effecting real change. When the final vote was tallied, the amended ordinance passed with a strong majority. A cheer went up from the audience, and Jamal felt a surge of emotion, relief, pride, and hope for the future. As people filed out discussing the implementation phase ahead, Jamal understood that this was just the beginning. The challenge of changing hearts and minds remained, but for the first time in weeks, he felt genuinely optimistic about what lay ahead. As Jamal entered the conference room for the anti-bias training program, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. The room was filled with skeptical police officers and retail workers, creating an undercurrent of tension. Taking a deep breath, he approached the podium. "A few months ago, I walked into a jewelry store to buy a birthday present for my mom," Jamal began, his voice initially shaky but growing stronger. "I left in handcuffs, accused of a crime I didn't commit." As Jamal recounted his experience, the room fell silent. He described the fear that gripped him when surrounded by police, the humiliation of being treated like a criminal, and the lasting impact on his sense of safety in his own community. Officer Mike Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd responded to countless shoplifting calls over the years, but hearing Jamal's perspective made him question his own assumptions. Had he ever rushed to judgment based on appearance alone? Jamal's words painted a vivid picture of racial profiling. He spoke of classmates who now avoided certain stores, of younger siblings taught to keep their hands visible at all times, of a community's eroding trust in those sworn to protect them. As the session progressed, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Questions from the audience became more thoughtful and empathetic. Retail workers shared their own struggles with unconscious bias, while officers grappled with the unintended consequences of standard procedures. Near the end of his talk, Jamal locked eyes with Officer Brennan. "I'm not here to accuse anyone," he said. "I'm here because I believe we can do better, that we can build a community where everyone feels safe and respected." To Jamal's surprise, Officer Brennan approached him during the break. "I want to apologize," Brennan said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I came in here thinking I knew it all, your story. It's opened my eyes to things I never considered." As attendees filed out, many stopped to thank Jamal or share their own reflections. The seed of change had been planted, but its growth would require continued effort and honest dialogue. In the months that followed, the impact of the training program became evident. Reports of racial profiling incidents decreased, while community engagement initiatives flourished. Jamal's story had become a catalyst for real change, proving that one voice, when raised with courage and honesty, could indeed make a difference. The warm spring sun bathed Millbrook's main street as Alexandra and Jamal Jones approached Hartley's Jewelry. 1 year had passed since that fateful day that changed their lives and their community. Jamal's steps slowed as they neared the storefront, his heart rate quickening. Alexandra squeezed her son's shoulder gently. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," she said softly. Jamal took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "No, I want to. It's time." As they pushed open the door, the familiar chime rang out. But this time, instead of suspicion, they were greeted with warm smiles from the staff. A sign near the entrance caught their attention. "All are welcome here. We stand against racial profiling. Jamal's eyes swept the space, taking in the subtle but significant changes. Security cameras were now clearly visible, their presence reassuring rather than intimidating. As they browsed the displays, a sales associate approached them. "Welcome to Hartley's," she said warmly. "Is there anything I can help you find today?" Jamal hesitated for a moment, memories of his last visit flashing through his mind. But the genuine kindness in the woman's eyes helped ease his tension. "Actually, yes," he replied. "I'm looking for a gift for my mom." The associate, her name tag reading Maria, smiled brightly. "That's wonderful. Let me show you some options I think she might like." As Maria led them through the store, pointing out various pieces, Jamal found himself relaxing. The knot of anxiety in his stomach began to unwind. He caught glimpses of other customers, a diverse mix of people, being treated with equal respect and attention. After some consideration, Jamal selected a delicate silver bracelet for Alexandra. As they approached the counter to make the purchase, he noticed a framed document on the wall. The store's commitment to diversity and inclusion, signed by all employees. The transaction was complete. Jamal and his mother stepped back out onto the sun-drenched sidewalk. Alexandra turned to her son, her eyes shining with pride and a hint of tears. "How do you feel?" she asked. Jamal was quiet for a moment, processing the experience. "It's different," he said finally. "Better. I didn't feel like I was being watched or judged. It felt like progress." As they walked down the street, Alexandra noticed other businesses displaying similar welcoming signs. The atmosphere in Millbrook had shifted, becoming more inclusive and aware. Jamal's voice broke into her thoughts. "You know, Mom, I think we did make a difference." Alexandra smiled, wrapping an arm around her son's shoulders. "We did, honey. But there's still work to be done." As they continued their walk, they both felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their experience had sparked a change, and they were committed to seeing it through. Jamal sat down to write his college application essays, the cursor blinking on his screen. The prompt asked him to describe a significant experience that shaped his life. He hesitated, uncertain how to approach the incident at Hartley's without letting it define him entirely. As he began to type, memories flooded back. The fear when surrounded by police. The shame of being accused, the anger that followed, but also the pride he felt speaking at the community forum, the sense of purpose that grew with each training session. Alexandra noticed her son's struggle and sat beside him. "What's troubling you?" she asked gently. Jamal sighed. "I want to write about what happened, but I'm worried it'll overshadow everything else about me." Alexandra nodded. "Think about how you've grown, what you've learned. That's the story they need to hear." Her words sparked something in Jamal. He began to write about the journey that followed the incident. He described finding his voice, developing empathy for others with similar experiences, and grappling with complex emotions that shaped his worldview. As the essay took shape, Jamal analyzed the impact of events, reflecting on the person he'd become. He researched potential majors, feeling drawn to programs in social justice and public policy. He saw a path forward where he could channel his experiences into meaningful action. Weeks passed as Jamal anxiously checked the mailbox. Finally, the first thick envelope arrived, then another, and another. Alexandra watched with pride as her son opened acceptance letters from top universities across the country. Holding the letters, Jamal felt a sense of possibility wash over him. He'd taken control of his narrative, refusing to be defined by a single moment of injustice. Instead, he'd used it as a foundation for a future dedicated to creating a more equitable world. Jamal stepped onto the stage at the National Youth Activism Conference, his heart racing. The audience before him represented a sea of potential, eager to hear his story. He began to speak, recounting the incident at Hartley's Jewelry. His voice remained steady as he described the fear and humiliation he felt that day. Jamal's narrative evolved, detailing his journey from a frightened teenager to a passionate advocate for change. He spoke of community forums, tense city council meetings, and the landmark ordinance that transformed policing in Millbrook. As Jamal's speech concluded, hands shot up across the auditorium. A young woman from Chicago stood, her voice trembling slightly. "Your story is inspiring, but how do we maintain this momentum? It feels like we're constantly facing setbacks." Jamal nodded, understanding the weight of her question. He shared his own moments of doubt and frustration, but emphasized the importance of persistence. "Progress isn't always straightforward," he explained. "We'll face challenges, but each small victory contributes to greater change. We must continue to push forward and speak out, even when it seems no one is listening." His words resonated with the crowd. As more questions came, the room's energy shifted. The initial awe transformed into a sense of collective purpose. These young activists were ready to take action. During a break, Jamal found himself surrounded by attendees, sharing their own experiences with racial profiling. As they talked, an idea emerged: creating a network to connect young activists across the country. Excitement spread through the conference center. By the end of the day, the foundations of a national youth network against racial profiling had been established. Social media handles were exchanged, and plans for virtual meetings were set in motion. As the conference concluded, Jamal addressed the audience one final time. He looked out at the sea of faces, seeing a united force for change. "We stand at a pivotal moment," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We can choose to accept the world as it is, or we can fight for the world as it should be. A world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, where justice is truly blind, and where every person feels safe in their own community." The applause was thunderous as Jamal finished speaking. A conference organizer approached him, inviting him to be a keynote speaker at next year's event. Jamal left the conference with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had come to share his story, but departed as a recognized leader in a burgeoning movement. As he boarded his flight home, Jamal reflected on the journey that began in a jewelry store. It had led him here, but it was far from over. The real work was just beginning. Alexandra and Jamal Jones sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The past year had transformed their lives in ways they never imagined. Alexandra's fingers traced the silver bracelet on her wrist, a reminder of Jamal's courageous return to Hartley's jewelry. They discussed the changes in Millbrook, the new police training programs, the community outreach initiatives, but both knew that true change required more than just policies. It demanded a sustained effort to shift hearts and minds. As darkness fell, Jamal turned to his mother. "Do you think we've really made a difference?" Alexandra squeezed his hand. "We've started a crucial conversation. Now it's up to everyone to keep it going and turn words into action." Their gazes met, filled with determination. The work ahead was daunting, but they were committed to seeing it through. As the stars appeared overhead, Alexandra and Jamal silently renewed their dedication to building a more just and equitable future for their community. Join our community of people who believe in justice, empathy, and powerful storytelling. By subscribing, you're not just watching, you're part of a movement that values real stories and change. Add us to your daily routine and make every story count. Subscribe and join us each day for stories that make an impact.